This is your World War III update. There's two types of people that you guys are going to meet in life. People who panic on the way up and people who panic on the way down. Everybody is going to panic equally. It's just a question of whether you panic now while there's food in the grocery store, electricity flowing through the power lines, water flowing through the taps, or if you're on the other side of that trade, like 90% of people who are not preppers, we're going to panic when everybody else decides to panic. Only, and I say only, when their social referencing reaches a sufficient threshold will they take action. They've been conditioned to believe that fear is a bad thing. What did Warren Buffett say? Be fearful when people are greedy, and greedy when people are fearful. This is an immutable law that transcends not only the realm of investing and finance, but preparedness as well. You want to panic before everybody. That is the hallmark of any successful person, not only for surviving, because anxiety is an essential emotion, an essential motivation, one of the most primal of motivating factors in a person's life that prevents you from dying right when you step foot outside your door in the morning. Without it, you'd be dead. You'd walk out into traffic with your headphones on and your coffee spilling everywhere, and you'd get clipped because fear is essential. Now, what I implore you to do at this point in time is to panic right now. Don't panic after shit hits the fan. Panic right now. There's still food in the stores. Oh, you need motivation? You need motivation to prep after the events of the last 48 hours? Well, you came to the right place. Let's talk about it. Oh, insiders are dumping stocks. Bitcoin is blowing up because a Satoshi-era whale, a guy who bought, or somebody who bought in 2009, decided to dump over $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. Not good. Not good. And as it trends downward with stocks, which are also crashing today, it appears as though there's an inverse relationship with gold and metals that are rocketing once again. We told you to hodl. We told you to be patient. If you hold it, you actually own it. Not enough motivation for you? Well, how about the fact that Ukrainians, backed by NATO ISR and co-manufactured missiles called the Flamingo missile. Yes, a flaming missile fired by the blue-haired brigade penetrating deep inside Russia. Boy, that's a nasty visual, isn't it? Well, they decided to target a Russian nuclear missile manufacturing plant. Yes, you heard correct. Not only have they targeted radars, not only did they do Operation Spiderweb, where they tried to destroy all of Russia's nuclear bombers, not only, ammunition depot after ammunition depot, elements of all the critical infrastructure that support the Russian nuclear triad, now they targeted one of Russia's main manufacturing plants where they manufacture all of their nuclear missiles. What could possibly go wrong? As Zelensky claims that they're preparing for another 3 years of war. Western armies are looking to conscript immigrants. Everybody wants to conscript immigrants. You know why? Because ain't nobody signing up to fight a war. But it seems like most people want a war. Crazy to say, but a lot of people, there's very little resistance to the idea of starting World War III at this point in time. Ukraine is blowing up pipelines. The Druzhba pipeline. I wish I had my monitor today. The colossal explosion that we seen at that pipeline was truly remarkable. And of course, this is significant in light of recent threats by Hungary and Slovakia that they're going to cut off electricity to Ukraine. So what does Ukraine do? The very next day, they blow up a part of the pipeline that is a transfer station, which is essential for the pipeline's function. So Slovakia today says, well, I guess we're not sending you electricity. So it seems like there is a fissure, a rupturing of relations within the NATO ranks. We have a civil war in Mexico. All those people who thought it was a good idea to go and sojourn in a place that is run by drug cartels are quickly realizing that that has its limits. Probably not a good idea to be traveling right now. In fact, oil companies are advising their execs not to travel to the Middle East in the coming days ahead. They're evacuating embassies throughout the Middle East. They're even evacuating military bases that are too proximate the Iranian theater. The AI arms race is heating up. Claude is embroiled in all kinds of controversy, from the Pentagon to China stealing its stuff and training using fake accounts, 24,000 fake accounts, training a better model than Anthropic's model. So the AI arms race is out of control. Food inflation, still high. Copper being stockpiled by the US and China, who I should remind you is very, very quiet right now. They are the latent threat in the room. They are just waiting for something to pop off in Iran. Russia can't wait for the Iran war to start because they need oil revenue. Because if that war with Iran doesn't start, Russia's going to have to go nuclear. The shit is literally hitting the fan. The fecal matter is hitting the oscillating device on the USS Ford, which is being flooded with sewage right now. Talk about a bad omen. I mean, that's almost, if there ever was a modern day plague or a modern day, 10 plagues of Egypt, things aren't off to a good start for the USS Ford that is currently up Schitt's Creek with a wooden paddle. Maybe it was all that lobster they ate on one of their departing voyages. Whenever they're about to depart on a mission, they typically are given the creme de la creme in terms of cuisine in order to boost morale. Well, it looks like everybody ate too much and all went number 2 at the same time. They're coming for the guns in Canada once again. They're getting desperate because apparently, since they declared that they were able to buy back 24,000 guns, they've only bought back another 8,000 in the subsequent 3 weeks. That was after the first week, so it's not working. So the RCMP is getting very desperate, and they're sending out all kinds of emails pleading with Canadians to self-report and tell them what they have so they can come and kick down their doors and get it. Bonnie Blue is pregnant. Bonnie Blue. I don't know if that is I think, now that I think about it, I seen her holding up the blue, the pregnancy tests. I wonder if that's a marketing. I wonder if they paid her to advertise. Yeah, she's pregnant, and apparently it's belongs to one of 400 dudes or something who are going to have to get genetically tested. Yeah, so that's what's going on. Now, let's talk a little bit about... I don't want to talk about the Civil War in Mexico because I don't know much about that. But of course, that was a ticking time bomb. That was but one of well over a dozen cartels that just decided to voice its grievance because their cartel ringleader was killed by the government, presumably. And they decided to just light fires all over the place as a show of force to the government. Now, interestingly, just a few days ago, if some of you guys recall, there was that notice to airmen that took place, I believe it was at a U.S. airport. Wasn't it a major U.S. airport? You guys know what I'm talking about. And people didn't know why, something unidentified flying objects coming in from Mexico. So was this a play by the U.S.? Who knows? But we could well see Mexico, which is one of the world's largest suppliers of silver, I should add, and a significant supplier of gold as well, taken offline because they're barricading all kinds of roads. That could cause a lot of logistical issues. At first, I thought, okay, this is going to be temporary. It's going to be short-lived. But this could be the beginning of the big cartel crackdown, and that is going to be a civil war. And if in World War III, who do you think the cartels are going to side with? They're not going to side with the government. They're going to side with probably the East, right? The opposing side. And you can bet that the opposing side will likely try to fan the flames of that conflagration, because why not? Which is not to say that they're leading it, like some people are suggesting, that Hezbollah is, directing, or that the IRGC or Russians or Chinese sleeper cells are directing these cartels per se. They've been in operation long before a lot of those groups. So, no, this is really just a time to be opportunistic if you're the East and capitalize on this unstable situation at your borders. In terms of what's going on with the nuclear plant, not the nuclear plant, but the nuclear missile manufacturing facility inside Russia. Now that took place, I think it was well over 1,000 kilometers behind Russian lines. And we have satellite confirmation. There's a gaping hole in the top of this factory, which will surely create a bottleneck problem of sorts. Now, this Flamingo missile, which was talked about last year, Zelensky was saying that they could create something like 7 of these a day at their peak. So one of these missiles potentially has severely compromised the supply chain of some of Russia's biggest missiles, the Iskander, Kinzhal, Orezhnik, Yars, Topol, ICBMs, the Beluga sub-launch ballistic missile. All of these missiles are manufactured at this plant. And the Ukrainians were able to hit it, leveraging technology which is very similar to the Tomahawk missile or the Storm Shadow cruise missile. So to circumvent the whole issue of whether or not NATO itself would green light and directly provide missiles to do deep strikes inside of Russia, they just helped the Ukrainians build one. The Ukrainians did not do this of their own volition, which is why the conversation has shifted in Russia to one of a preemptive nuclear strike, because now they're starting to realize, okay, they can now have access to a lot of our softer targets, despite the fact that a lot of these places are protected by air defense. They're protected by air defense, which I presume is tailored towards like loitering munitions, drones, things that travel a little bit slower. They even have a lot of troops stationed at these facilities for that purpose. But this is big, and I think this is going to be something Russia has to respond to. We've seen massive exchanges all weekend that I just, I threw up my hands this weekend, and I was like, there's no reason in reporting anything. There's just too much going on. At some point, it reaches this point of saturation, and it becomes meaningless to talk about anything. And on days like that, that's when you just go out to the store and stock up, buy a few things, run a few errands, just do a little inventory of your preparedness efforts, because that's all you can do. What more confirmation do we need at this point in time? We have evacuation of non-essential personnel from the Middle East. Fox News is now reporting that U.S. evacuation of non-essential personnel from the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. Now, is this whole thing a head fake and they're really just going to try to clean out Hezbollah? Maybe, possibly. There's a distinct possibility of that, but I don't think so. The Pentagon, Dan Davies, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he has apparently only now voiced an objection to, and I guess you can't even really call it that, but voiced some concerns about the upcoming operation, that it might become a protracted conflict. Now, the question is, why are we only hearing this now? Why are Pentagon and White House officials only starting to voice their grievances with the looming, sustained conflict with Iran now? And the answer is simple. It's information warfare. They have a plan. They're going to run it. Everything between now and when they run it is strictly to try to keep the enemy guessing. That's it. Okay? So almost disregard anything that Trump, the White House, the State Department, the Pentagon, disregard everything they're saying right now, and just know, look with your eyes, believe what your eyes are telling you, is that they're planning for a massive war in the Middle East. And as I explained comprehensively in discussing the various scenarios that could unfold in my video on the Canadian Prepper channel that I would encourage you to go check out, that I released on Friday, it's like 50 minutes long, where I very methodically and meticulously go through the best case, the medium case, and the worst case scenario. If Iran falls, that's bad news for Russia. It's good news in the short term because it jacks the price of oil. But from a geostrategic point of view, it's very, very bad. And I think this is when China, who is being incredibly quiet right now, not saying a damn thing, is likely going to make their move. Zelensky also recently threatened Belarus. He threatened them with a potential European deployment. He's talking about having several brigades of French and UK soldiers entering into Ukraine soon. Okay? Iranians had their phones hacked. A mass text message was sent out to the Iranian population, which said, "To the oppressed Iranian people, the American president is a man of action." Now, if this, I don't know if this was like an internal hack or what, but if they have access to everybody's phones in Iran, you really got to wonder what else they have access to and what they're planning. This AI stuff is a force multiplier. So anybody who is saying that they don't have enough assets in the region, or they don't have enough assets as they did during the Gulf War, you need to understand that AI and just ISR advancements have just been huge force multipliers, which have drastically limited the amount of weaponry that you need. Because back in the day, you might have to expend 10 to 20 missiles to achieve one objective. Nowadays, with pinpoint precision and excellent intelligence, you can accomplish that using one or two. So the returns are far higher. Okay? Oil companies worldwide are sending email to staff across 6 Middle Eastern countries advising against non-essential travel at this time and posting the same guidance on their intranet documents. Karaganov. You guys are familiar with the Karaganov doctrine by now if you've watched this channel for some time. It stipulates that you need to establish escalation dominance to stop this war in its tracks and throttle the transgressions of NATO, who is encroaching upon Russia's red lines at every step. It's explicitly calling for a shift towards active nuclear deterrence and preparing and threatening limited nuclear strikes. Karaganov, of course, is a Russian analyst that I've talked about for years. Tucker Carlson, I almost called him Russian Carlson. Geez, that was a Freudian slip. He interviewed him, I believe, a few weeks ago. And since then, he's been sort of gaining more popularity or notoriety here in the West. But he essentially is advising Putin that the only way to stop the West's restless advance. Sorry, I never got any sleep last night. I was too busy thinking about all this shit. In order to stop the Western advance, you need to do some sort of demonstrative nuclear strike or a conventional strike inside Europe to sober them up, to wake them up. He doesn't believe that Europe will respond with an equivalent nuclear strike because they're cowards and we need to call them on their bluff. He said that we must be ready for retaliative strategic nuclear strikes. Jesus, I cannot talk today, guys. I am tongue-twisted and tongue-tied. I had a good sleep. I went to bed at 12, then I woke up at 4 a.m., and then I started thinking about SHTF, and I couldn't get back to sleep. And usually when that happens, my neural functioning capacity is greatly diminished. But he is basically advising to do a demonstrative nuclear strike in order to put Europe in its place. Otherwise, they're just going to keep ramping things up. I think somebody's going to break the nuclear seal in the short term, and it's likely not going to be the Russians. It could very well be the Israelis or the Iranians, for that matter. We have to see how things play out. Now, if this war stays below the nuclear threshold, but if they start targeting Iran's very soft, vulnerable ports and oil refineries that are well within striking reach of NATO weaponry, that they could eliminate on the first day, Iran will have no other choice but to respond in kind. And when they start blowing up, doing a tit-for-tat destruction of oil refineries in the Middle East, oil goes to several $100s a barrel. And that's when you start to have gas runs in the West. That's when the food, if you think food is expensive now, one of the main contributing factors to food inflation is the price of energy. Because the price of energy has been so subdued, the price of food has only inflated so much. I was going to say subdued, but it's not. Here in Canada, it's 7.1% on the year. In the US, it's a little bit lower, but it's still high. It's still like 3% on top of all the compounded inflation throughout the COVID era and prior. So if you add a skyrocketing price of oil on top of that, that's when everything begins to break. And this is why I think the economy is starting to finally break today, and why people are starting to move into gold. Now, people sold gold and silver because there was a liquidity crisis. They knew that this break in the markets was coming. And of course, the Fed or the powers that be, they could, they have a lot of tools in their toolbox in order to manipulate things. I wouldn't be surprised if the market skyrocketed tomorrow. They might skyrocket on the day that Iran decides to defend itself from the U.S. aggression, because that's really what it is. I mean, this is a unilateral war of aggression. There is absolutely zero reason whatsoever to invade Iran. You can say, oh, the humanitarian blah, blah, blah. It was U.S. sanctions that caused the dire economic circumstances that are causing all of these useful idiots to rebel. And that's just the truth. It is U.S. sanctions that have caused the austerity. If it wasn't for that, the Iranians are like the North Koreans. They're an incredibly disciplined people. These are not people who, they've mastered nuclear science, rocket science. They are scholars. They're academics. These are very intelligent and capable, disciplined people that if they were allowed into the global system, they would be easily probably a member of the G8. But because of the sanctions barring them from partaking in the spoils of globalization, well, they've had to impose very austere measures. And of course, if they want to maintain their sovereignty, that means they have to do things that are likely politically unpopular with their population, especially the recalcitrant youth, who of course are going to rebel, because that's what youth do. That's what a healthy, thriving, youthful society does. And I think, if anything, the resistance inside Iran is a sign of a healthy society to a certain extent, that people still, despite having the crackdown happen, because of course the events were co-opted. It wasn't until the events were co-opted by U.S. intelligence and Israeli intelligence forces that the Iranians had to be so heavy-handed in their disciplinary tactics. So they caused the problem, and now they're coming with a solution. Oh, we got to come and bomb you. That's going to save you. We're going to come and blow up all of your critical infrastructure so the economic situation gets worse and you go into civil war and your country becomes balkanized. It's Assyria 2.0. All your ancient historical monuments will be destroyed by radical fanatics. And Merry Christmas. And these idiots are going to buy it hook, line, and sinker. We don't need to be in that war, but we're going to be. It's not just because of Israel. It's because of the military-industrial complex. You got to look at who stands to benefit. It's the people who are selling weapons who stand to benefit immensely. And of course, geostrategically, the goal is to try to hurt China as much as possible. And nobody else is saying this. Everybody else is saying, oh, that's taboo. But I'm telling you right now, remember where you heard this first. I told you about the conscripting immigrants. I was the first to talk many years ago about the Iran war being an impending thing before it was cool. And I'm telling you now, and I also told you that Trump wouldn't end the war with Russia and Ukraine, which has gotten much worse than it has under Biden. And I'm telling you right now that you're going to see two prices for oil. The petrodollar is not long for this world, and that's why gold is spiking. Trump is getting ready to nuke the petrodollar. If that means that all of Saudi Aramco goes up in flames and all of Iran's oil production goes up in flames, they don't care. The U.S. has Venezuelan oil, and they're going to likely nationalize and fix the price of oil here in North America. Okay, and that's going to create It's going to be treated like natural gas. It's going to be different prices on different continents. Now, there might be some arbitrage schemes, I don't doubt, but I don't think it's going to be economically viable for a litany of reasons. But that's what's coming. The bifurcation of East and West commodity markets. Possibly even gold and silver. Because if you can't trade with a country because you're at war with them, then it's going to be priced in whatever it's priced in here, which is not to say if you can't smuggle it into that country, but that could come with all kinds of consequences. I'm going to leave it at that, my friends. Keep on prepping. Panic before the shit hits the fan.